Hen Ogledd, in English the Old North, is the region of northern England and the southern Scottish Lowlands inhabited by Celtic Britons during the post-Roman period and the Early Middle Ages. Its denizens spoke a variety of the Brittonic language known as Cumbric.The Hen Ogledd was distinct from the parts of northern Britain inhabited by the Picts, Anglo-Saxons, and Scots, as well as from Wales. Although the region loomed large in Welsh literature and tradition for centuries after its kingdoms had disappeared, the major kingdoms of the Hen Ogledd were Elmet in western Yorkshire, Gododdin in Lothian and the Scottish borders, Rheged, centred in Cumbria, and Strathclyde, situated around the Firth of Clyde. Smaller kingdoms or districts included Erin, Calchfnid, Iden, Udiniorn, and Manor. The latter three were evidently parts of Gododdin. The Angle kingdoms of Deira and Bernicia both had Brittonic-derived names, suggesting they may have been Brittonic kingdoms in origin. All the kingdoms of the Old North except Strathclyde were conquered by Angles and Picts by about 800. Strathclyde was incorporated into the rising Kingdom of Scotland in the 11th century. The legacy of the Hen Ogledd remained strong in Wales. Welsh tradition included genealogies of the Rheged Ogledd, or Men of the North, and several important Welsh dynasties traced the lineage to them. A number of important early Welsh texts were attributed to the Men of the North, such as Taliesin, Aneurin, Merddin Wyllt, and the Cinfedd poets. Heroes of the North such as Urien Rheged, Owain mab Urien, and Culhwch and his descendants feature in Welsh poetry and the Welsh triads. Background: almost nothing is reliably known of central Britain before c. 550. There had never been a period of long-term, effective Roman control north of the Tyne-Solway line, and south of the line effective Roman control ended long before the traditionally given date of departure of the Roman military from Roman Britain, in 407. It was noted in the writings of Ammianus Marcellinus and others that there was ever decreasing Roman control from the 2nd century onward, and in the years after 360 there was widespread disorder and the large-scale permanent abandonment of territory by the Romans. By 550, the region was controlled by Brittonic-speaking peoples except for the eastern coastal areas, which were controlled by the Anglian peoples of Bernicia and Deira. To the north were the Picts, themselves also called Manaw, with the Gaelic kingdom of Dalriata to the northwest. All of these peoples would play a role in the history of the Old North. Historical context. From a historical perspective, the portrayal of the Men of the North as native Britons defending against intruding Anglo-Saxons is a partisan view. Wars were frequently internecine, and Britons were aggressors as well as defenders, as was also true of the Angles, Picts, and Gaels. However, those Welsh stories of the Old North that tell of Britain fighting Anglian have a counterpart told from the opposite side. The story of the demise of the kingdoms of the Old North is the story of the rise of Northumbria from two coastal kingdoms to become the premier power in Britain north of the Humber estuary and south of the Firths of Clyde and Forth. The interests of kingdoms of this era were not restricted to their immediate vicinity. Alliances were not made only within the same ethnic groups, nor were enmities restricted to nearby different ethnic groups. An alliance of Britons fought against another alliance of Britons at the Battle of Afderil. Eden mac Gabrain of Dalriata appears in the Bonnet Rheged Ogledd, a genealogy among the pedigrees of the Men of the North. The Historia Brittonum states that the Northumbrian king Oswiu married a Briton who may have had some Pictish ancestry. A marriage between the Northumbrian and Pictish royal families would produce the Pictish king Lorged. Edwin. Eden mac Gabrain fought as an ally of the Britons against the Northumbrians. Cadwallon ap Cadfan of Gwynedd allied with Penda of Mercia to defeat Edwin of Northumbria. Conquest and defeat did not necessarily mean the extirpation of one culture and its replacement by another. The Brittonic region of northwestern England was absorbed by Anglian Northumbria in the 7th century, yet it would re-emerge 300 years later as South Cumbria joined with North Cumbria into a single state. Societal context. The organization of the men of the North was tribal, based on kinship groups of extended families, owing allegiance to a dominant royal family, sometimes indirectly through client relationships, and receiving protection in return. For Celtic peoples, this organization was still in effect hundreds of years later, as shown in the Irish Brehon Law, the Welsh laws of Howld-Da, and the Scottish laws of the Brets and Scots. The Germanic Anglo-Saxon law had culturally different origins, but with many similarities to Celtic law. Like Celtic law, it was based on cultural tradition, without any perceivable debt to the Roman occupation of Britain. A primary royal court would be maintained as a capital, but it was not the bureaucratic administrative center of modern society, nor the settlement or civitas of Roman rule. As the ruler and protector of his kingdom, the king would maintain multiple courts throughout his territory, traveling among them to exercise his authority and to address the needs of his clients, such as in the dispensing of justice. This ancient method of dispensing justice survived throughout England as a part of royal procedure until the reforms of Henry II modernized the administration of law. Language. Modern scholarship uses the term Cumbric for the variety of the common Brittonic language spoken in the Hen Ogledd. It appears to have been very closely related to Old Welsh, with similar local variances. There are no surviving texts written in the dialect. Evidence for it comes from place names, proper names in a few early inscriptions and later non-Cumbric sources, two terms in the ledges into Bretos a Scotos, and the corpus of poetry by the Sinfad, the early poets, nearly all of which deals with the North. The Sinfad poetry is the largest source of information, and it is generally accepted that some part of the corpus was first composed in the Old North. However, it survives entirely in later manuscripts created in Wales, and it is unknown how faithful they are to the originals. Still, the texts contain discernible variances that distinguish the speech from contemporary Welsh. In particular, these texts contain a number of archaisms, features that appear to have once been common in all Brittonic varieties, but which later vanished from Welsh and the southwestern dialects. In general, however, the differences appear to be slight, and a distinction between Cumbric and Old Welsh is largely geographical rather than linguistic. Cumbric gradually disappeared as the area was conquered by the Anglo-Saxons, and later the Scots and Norse, though it survived in the kingdom of Strathclyde, centred at Elmet in what is now Dumbarton in Scotland. Kenneth H. Jackson suggested that it re-emerged in Cumbria in the 10th century, as Strathclyde established hegemony over that area. It is unknown when Cumbric finally became extinct, but the series of counting systems of Celtic origin recorded in northern England since the 18th century have been proposed as evidence of a survival of elements of Cumbric, though the view has been largely rejected on linguistic grounds, with evidence pointing to the fact that it was imported to England after the Old English era. Welsh interest. One of the traditional stories relating to the creation of Wales is derived from the arrival in Wales of Cynedda and his sons as men of the North. Cynedda himself is held to be the progenitor of the royal dynasty of Gwynedd, one of the largest and most powerful of the medieval Welsh kingdoms, and an ongoing participant in the history of the Old North. Cynedda, incidentally, is represented as a descendant of one of Maximus's generals, Brittonic, who Maximus appointed as commander at Elmet, However, the relationship between Wales and the Old North is more substantial than this one event, amounting to a self-perception that the Welsh and the men of the North are one people. Many of the traditional sources of information about the Old North are believed to have come to Wales from the Old North, and bards such as Aneurin are thought to have been court poets in the Old North. These stories and bards are held to be no less Welsh than the stories and bards who were actually from Wales. Kingdoms and regions. Major kingdoms. Places in the Old North that are mentioned as kingdoms in the literary and historical sources include Celtic or Strathclyde, a kingdom centred at what is now Dumbarton in Scotland. Later known as the Kingdom of Strathclyde, it was one of the best attested of the northern British kingdoms. It was also the last surviving, as it operated as an independent realm into the 11th century before it was finally absorbed by the Kingdom of Scotland. Elmet, centred in western Yorkshire in northern England. It was located south of the other northern British kingdoms, and well east of present-day Wales, but managed to survive into the early 7th century. Gododdin, a kingdom in what is now southeastern Scotland and northeastern England, the area previously noted as the territory of the Gododdini. They are the subjects of the poem Why Gododdin, which memorializes a disastrous raid by an army raised by the Gododdin on the Angles of Bernicia. Rheged, a major kingdom that evidently included parts of present-day Cumbria, though its full extent is unknown. It may have covered a vast area at one point, as it is very closely associated with its king Urien, whose name is tied to places all over northwestern Britain. Minor kingdoms and other regions. Several regions are mentioned in the sources, assumed to be notable regions within one of the kingdoms if not separate kingdoms themselves. Erin, a minor kingdom mentioned in sources such as Why Gododdin. Its location is uncertain, but several scholars have suggested that it was in the Ayrshire region of southwest Scotland. It is frequently associated with Urien Rheged, and may have been part of his realm. Calchfnid. Almost nothing is known about this area, though it was likely somewhere in the Hen Ogledd, as an evident ruler, Cadrad Calchfnid, is listed in the Boned Gwyrwg Ogledd. William Forbes Skene suggested an identification with Kelso in the Scottish borders. Iden. This was the area around the modern city of Edinburgh, then known as Dunedin. It was closely associated with the Gododdin kingdom. Kenneth H. Jackson argued strongly that Iden referred exclusively to Edinburgh, but other scholars have taken it as a designation for the wider area. The name may survive today in toponyms such as Edinburgh, Dunedin, and Caradon, located 15 miles to the west. Dunedin was besieged by the Angles in 638 and was under the control for most of the next 3 centuries. Man or Gododdin, the coastal area south of the Firth of Forth, and part of the territory of the Gododdin. The name survives in Slamman and more in the village of Slammanon in Stirlingshire. This is derived from Slabmanon, the moor of Manon. It also appears in the name of Dalmeny, some 5 miles northwest of Edinburgh, and formerly known as Dumanin, assumed to be derived from Dunmannon. The name also survives north of the Forth in Pictish Manor as the name of the borough of Clackmannan and the eponymous county of Clackmannanshire, derived from Clackmannan, the stone of Manon, referring to a monument stone located there. Novant, a kingdom mentioned in Why Gododdin, presumably related to the Iron Age Novante tribe of southwestern Scotland. Regio Dunwinga, a minor kingdom, a region in North Yorkshire mentioned in the life of Wilfrid. It was evidently named for a ruler named Dunort, perhaps the Dunort ap Pabbo known from the genealogies. Its name may survive in the modern town of Dent, Cumbria. Kingdoms that were not part of the Old North but a part of its history include Dalriata, though this was a Gaelic kingdom. The family of Eden mac Gabrain of Dalriata appears in the bonnet Gwyrwig Ogledd, Northumbria and its predecessor states, Bernicia and Area. Pictish kingdom. Possible kingdoms. The following names appear in historical and literary sources, but it is unknown whether or not they refer to British kingdoms and regions of the Hen Ogledd. Brittonic. This is the British name for the Anglo-Saxon kingdom of Bernicia. There was probably a pre-Saxon British kingdom in this area, but this is uncertain. Deifrdewr. This was the British name for Anglo-Saxon Derea, a region between the River Tees and the Humber. The name is of British origin, but as with Brittonic it is unknown if it represented an earlier British kingdom. Citations